I am a big fan of the cool and unique Poké Balls. Luxury Ball, Premier Ball, Repeat Ball. Once I discovered all these, I couldn't bring myself to put one of my Poké friends in a boring little red sphere. Of all the different Poké Balls, one of the coolest designs around is the Moon Ball. There's so many Pokemon I'd love to entrap in this thing. Umbreon, Dusknoir, Lunatone, and Darkrai, to name a few. Unfortunately, none of these Pokemon can be captured in a Moon Ball until well past Generation 7. And considering my peak Pokemon playtime was Gens 4 and 5, I never truly got to use the Moon Ball in the way I wanted to. Why is the Moon Ball so scarce? What does it do, and can we spin its rarity into a crazy shiny hunt challenge? Stay tuned to find out. The Moon Ball is one of 7 Apricorn Balls. The Apricorn Balls. They aren't particularly special Pokeballs yet. Since their introduction in Generation 2, Game Freak decided to make them the rarest and most difficult to get a hold of items in the Pokemon franchise. Nowadays, Apricorn Balls are either once per game gimmicks or extremely rare prizes. They really should have just been sold in shops starting in Generation 3 along with the other cool and unique Pokeballs. There's already so few Pokeballs to choose from. Did you really have to be this stingy, Game Freak? The reason I lament the rarity of the Apricorn Balls is that they all have unique and interesting gimmicks, but they aren't particularly overpowered. They exist in this medium where they are just good enough that I want to use them in game, but not good enough to justify their rarity. I'm not complaining that you usually only get one Master Ball per game, because that's a Pokeball that never fails. Of course there's only going to be one per game. But why is a Pokeball that works better on Pokemon you find while fishing so rare? A netball gives the same benefit. You can buy that in a regular shop. It can be argued that these balls are so rare because they are just supposed to be cool little gimmicks. Something you can slap on your Pokemon to make it unique. But if that's the case, one per game is still too little. The thing about Pokeballs is if they don't successfully capture a wild Pokemon, you lose it completely. And statistically speaking, you'll probably just lose your Apricorn Ball unless you go out of your way to save before using it, which is a pain. Did they really implement these items so that players could painstakingly manipulate to actually use them? And to play devil's advocate, I do put the Pokemon I caught in these Apricorn Balls on a bit of a pedestal, even going so far as to sometimes nickname my Pokemon in line with the special Pokeball they reside in. So perhaps that's what they're going for, and in that sense, they did succeed. I just wish they would have used new Pokeballs that had a purpose that justified their rarity, rather than taking the old Apricorn Balls and plunging them into obscurity. The Apricorn Balls are most accessible in their home region of Johto in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and their remakes Pokemon Heartgold and Soulsilver. Until Generation 7, those were the only games you could receive and capture Pokemon in Apricorn Balls, leaving the pool of possible Pokemon to get in them quite small. The way to get Apricorn Balls in Johto is to gather apricorns that grow around the region on trees that regrow once per day. You could take your apricorns to Kurt, the Pokeball creator, who will then take all the apricorns you have of one color and turns them into Pokeballs the next day. So even though apricorns are accessible, in practice they are such a pain to get and so useless once you get them, I'm just not motivated to go through all this trouble for Pokeballs that just aren't very good. The Apricorn Balls all have different uses and different gimmicks depending on their color. What all the Apricorn Balls do is a subject for another video, so we are just going to focus on the most useless Apricorn Ball of all, the Moon Ball. The Moon Ball has a 4 times catch rate, twice as powerful as an Ultra Ball, on Pokémon that evolve with a Moonstone. In Gen 2, the Moon Ball actually only works better on Pokémon that evolve using a Burn Heal, which is none of them. Though the Apricorn Balls aren't a big deal in Gen 2 because you can't see the Pokéball your Pokémon was caught in, which to me is kind of the whole reason they matter at all. In Gen 4, they fixed the Burn Heal glitch, and the Moon Ball now works well on a total of 4 Pokémon. That's it, 4 Pokémon. A whole Pokéball for Clefairy, Jigglypuff, Nidorino, and Nidorina. Skitty also evolves with a Moonstone, but cannot be captured in a Moon Ball anywhere in Johto or Kanto. I was actually shocked this was the case about Skitty. There's a whole game mechanic called Hoenn Sound that makes certain Gen 3 Pokemon spawn in certain places if you play the Hoenn Sound music station. The developers did not add Skitty to the list of Pokemon in Hoenn Sound, instead opting for it to be caught on the Pokewalker, where every Pokemon comes in a default Pokeball. Lame. This means that Game Freak had a clear opportunity to make it possible for every Moonstone Pokemon to be caught in a Moon Ball, and just went, nah. I guess Game Freak was aware that only one crazy person would actually care about this, so they didn't bother. In fact, if I had to guess, I think the devs didn't even consider this for a second. So that's it, a whole Pokeball for 4 Pokemon. Definitely the most niche Pokeball in the entire series. Functionally, it's really just a cooler looking Premier Ball that's harder to get a hold of. There is one more thing that irks me about the Moon Ball, and it's that all 4 Pokemon that the Moon Ball would work best on all appear in the post-game. This means that even if you get Moon Balls from Kurt as early as Badge 2, they won't be able to be used for their intended function until after defeating the champion. Is anyone really encountering a level 23 Nidorino in the post-game where their team is already in their 50s and 60s and they have access to an abundance of other effective Pokeballs, and they're like, thank Arceus I've got the Moon Ball, I never would have caught this otherwise. This robs the player of being able to go through their Johto playthrough with an authentic Moon Ball captured Nidoking or Clefable. Sure, you can capture a regular Nidoran in a Moon Ball, but Nidoran doesn't get the Pokeball boost, so it would be no harder than capturing it in a regular Pokeball, and it's just not the same. I know you weren't caught with 4 times effectiveness, you fraud. Could the Moon Ball have been improved? Of course. I think the Moon Ball should be a little easier to get a hold of, and the Moonstone Pokemon should be able to be captured before the postgame. But what about the issue of how few Pokemon the Moon Ball actually works on? If the Moon Ball was expanded to work well on other Pokemon, then it wouldn't really have the Moon Ball identity anymore. Honestly, I don't really mind that there's a whole Pokeball that works well on so few Pokemon. Actually, I think that's one of the coolest things about the Moon Ball. Really, the big problem with the Moon Ball is that there's just the Moon Ball. Why not a Pokeball for the other Pokemon that evolved from stones? I guess that would mean there'd be a lot of different Pokeballs, but then maybe there should be a lot of different Pokeballs. Not just stone-related Pokeballs, but other that work on different types or other gimmicks. What's with 3 Pokeballs that work well on water Pokemon, 1 that works well on bug Pokemon, and every other type it just doesn't have one? Why not? The opportunity's there, why don't they take it? This is a subject for another video though. Let me know if that's something you'd want to see. Back on the subject of the Moon Ball, it's clear that something like the Moon Ball isn't intended to be a game-breaking strategic juggernaut. It's just supposed to have you go, I've got this item with me and it will actually work better against this Jigglypuff I encountered. And then that encounter now has something a little bit special associated with it. If they were just a little less scarce and the Pokemon they caught were a little more available, that feeling would have been achieved properly. So now that we've established why the Moon Ball is so special and rare, let's get to the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time to embark on the Moon Ball Challenge. Capturing a legendary Pokemon in a Poké Ball is not a new challenge. They're the hardest Pokemon to catch and the weakest Pokeball around. So why did I choose Mewtwo for this challenge? Because it looks awesome. No further questions. So I wanted to do more than just another challenge where you have to painstakingly grind up a bunch of rare Pokeballs to shiny hunt something. I already did that with my Luxury Ball challenge, where I tasked players with capturing a shiny Rayquaza and a Luxury Ball in Pokemon Emerald, where Luxury Balls were incredibly scarce. Check out that video, by the way, if you haven't seen it. However, Rayquaza in Generation 3 is just a more difficult legendary to catch than Mewtwo in Gen 4. Rayquaza had Rest for self-healing and Outrage that would self-inflict confusion. It was a risky Pokemon to go after. Heartgold and Soulsilver's Mewtwo is just not that tough in terms of legendary encounters. And also, Gen 4 gives you way more access to good Pokemon. So, what if you didn't have as much access to Pokemon? After all, this is the Moon Ball Challenge. If I'm so dedicated to the Moon Ball that I'm gonna shiny hunt Mewtwo in it, then I'm gonna have to put everyone in my team in a Moon Ball. So, here's one more crucial layer to the Moon Ball Challenge. You are required to get one of each Pokemon that actually has an increased catch rate from the Moon Ball. And since this is a shiny hunt challenge, they've all gotta sparkle. But before we go on the shiny hunt, we've gotta gather our Moon Balls. As mentioned before, the way to get Apricorn Balls is to bring Apricorns to Kurt. Moon Balls are made from yellow Apricorns. Each Apricorn tree regrows once per day, so we just have to gather all the yellow Apricorns in the game each day until we have roughly about 80, which will give us enough for the Mewtwo fight and our 4 Moon Ball captures. So let's start gathering Apricorns. How many yellow Apricorns can we get in one day anyway? 15? 20? 4? Wait, you're telling me that throughout all of Kanto and Johto, there are only 4 yellow Apricorn trees? I thought the Apricorn trees were everywhere. 4? Seriously? I guess they're a lot more scarce than I remember. This means that it'll take nearly 3 weeks to get enough Apricorns for the challenge if you go gather them every day. There's one located on Route 8 in Kanto, right next to Lavender Town. This is the only one in Kanto, and it's annoying that one happens to be in Kanto because of that weird arbitrary rule where you have to fly to the Pokemon League before you fly to the other region. Another one is located just below Violet City, which is also pretty easy to reach. The next one is in this patch of 3 over here in between Mahogany Town on Route 42, which requires Surf and Cut to get. You'll also want to use a Repel, or you'll probably get a lake encounter. Seems like a small task, but these little things add up. The last one is located all the way over here on Route 46, which is a brisk little hike through some tall grass. Grab those 4 over a few weeks and put Kurt to work. At least with Skitty unobtainable, that's one less shiny hunt to do, so for all you crazy challengers out there, that's about 40 hours of your life you can have back. This leaves us with needing to get a hold of Clefairy, Jigglypuff, Nidorino, and Nidorina. Nidorino and Nidorina are the easiest to find. They both have a 30% encounter rate over on Route 15 in Kanto. You should find your first shiny after about, say, 20 to 30,000 random encounters. Imagine how much it would hurt to encounter the same shiny twice. Like, you get 2 shiny Nidorinas before you find 1 shiny Nidorino. That sounds like some RNG pain. You can use Repel Trick, but it's minimally effective, only making it less likely to find Hoppip in the day and Quagsire at night. Probably not even worth the time spent to go into your bag and use the repels. Then you've got Jigglypuff, a 10% encounter rate over on Route 3. That's rough. You're looking at an average of 80,000 random encounters to find it. Still with me? If you Repel Trick at night, then you will not encounter any Zubats because they are level 5, while Jigglypuff is level 6, meaning you'll remove the 30% of Zubat. However, daytime is the better time to hunt, but only if you're playing Heartgold, since Ekans and Arbok, who are both higher level than Jigglypuff, do not appear in that version. It's probably better to get Heartgold and hunt for Jiggly in the daytime, since you'll erase all 30% of Rattatas and half of the 55% encounter rate Spearows, removing 57.5% of encounters. Then there's Clefairy, a 5% encounter rate. Eee. Now, I'm conflicted between Heartgold and Soulsilver, because Heartgold has Sandshrew and Sandslash as an encounter in Mount Moon, which always appear at the same level or higher than the always level 8 Clefairy. In Soulsilver, the game compensates for the lack of Sandshrew and Sandslash with higher rates for Zubat and Geodude, who may appear as level 6, which will be removed if you use the Repel trick, but they can also be found at higher levels as well. So that means that in Heartgold, you remove 30% of encounters with Repel trick, since Zubat is always level 6 in that game, but in Soulsilver, Repel Trick will remove 42.5% of encounters. This means that in Heartgold, you'll have an easier time finding Shiny Jigglypuff by removing 57.5% of the encounters, but in Soulsilver, you'll have an easier time finding Clefairy by removing 42.5% of encounters. Keep in mind, Jigglypuff is a 10% encounter rate, while Clefairy is a 5% encounter rate, and both only remove 30% of encounters in their worst version. So, which version should you get? I've done enough math for someone who's majored in creative writing. Go sort it out in the comments. That is, if you're truly a math genius. Once you get your Moonball Pokemon, you're gonna want to evolve them with their signature Moonstone. It's not too difficult to get 4 Moonstones. There are 2 you would have already picked up on your journey, and your mom might have sent you one too if you let her hold on to your money. However, if you really want to embrace this challenge for all it's worth, I would say you should get at least 1 Moonstone from the Clefairy dance. At Mount Moon Square on Monday nights, you can find all these Clefairy dancing around the lake with the moon shining above. When the Clefairy spot you, they all run away, leaving behind a Moonstone. So now that we've grown a comically large beard while catching these shinies, it's time to prep for the Mewtwo battle. So here's the funny thing about this. Nidoking and Nidoqueen are completely unnecessary for the battle. You will not need to send them out once. The only thing we need is for one of them to use Surf so we can navigate the cave. Speaking of field moves, you're probably gonna want Flash to get through this cave. You technically don't need Flash, but the move could actually help in the battle. Mewtwo's moveset is really forgiving. Its only attacking move is Psycho Cut, a 70 power physical psychic type move. Assuming we level up both Wigglytuff and Clefairy to level 100, they're not going to take that much damage from it. Mewtwo also has Amnesia, which raises its special defense, but that's not going to matter too much. And it also carries the obscure attacks Guard Swap and Power Swap. Guard Swap changes defensive stat changes with the opponent, and Power Swap changes offensive stat changes with the opponent. This just switches the stat changes, not the stats themselves. So if Mewtwo uses Amnesia, it will then gift the special defense over to you, which won't matter because Mewtwo's only attacking move is physical. Psycho Cut and Amnesia have 20 PP, while the swap attacks have 10, leaving you a guaranteed 40 turns, but we'll be able to get a bit more than that. Wigglytuff will have the moves Thunder Wave, Flash, and Pound, while Clefable will have the moves Trick, Minimize, and Mud Slap. I considered having Wigglytuff and Clefable use Sing instead of using Thunder Wave, but I just couldn't justify that low accuracy of a move. I think Thunder Wave is the better option. Getting some of these moves will actually require you to go to the Battle Frontier. You'll need 32 BP for the Thunder Wave TM. 32 BP is a lot. The Battle Frontier is stingy with its currency. You're gonna get like 1 BP for beating 7 trainers. It's madness. You'll at least get something like 20 BP when you beat a Frontier Brain, which happens after you beat 21 trainers in a row. Thunder Wave isn't even that great of a move. It can even be taught for free in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but Fire Red and Leaf Green doesn't have the Moon Ball. So next we have to teach Mud Slap, which also costs BP but at a move tutor. The reason I went with Mud Slap is because it is an attack so weak that it can make Mewtwo go from low yellow into red health without knocking it out, even if it happens to crit. Since Mud Slap is such a weak move tutor move, it probably wouldn't cost that much BP to teach. What'll it be? 4 BP? 6? 32 more BP! 32! You have to defeat one of the Titans of the Battle Frontier in order to get enough BP to learn a move that Mudkip learns at level 6? What strategic value does this move hold that makes its tutoring so expensive? These developers, man. Last is Trick. 48 BP. Hope you like more battles. At least Trick feels a little more justified in its BP cost. I mean, none of these BP costs are fair considering how hard it is to build up BP, but still, Trick is a unique, strategically valuable move unlike Mud Slap. Now it's battle time. The first thing you want to do in the battle is inflict paralysis. Paralysis will sometimes cause Mewtwo not to attack, buying you turns. It also increases its catch rate. Then you'll want to hit it with about 4 or so flashes, meaning it will sometimes miss its Psycho Cut. Wigglytuff's Pound can be used once or twice before Mewtwo gets into crit range. At that point, you'll need to switch into Clefable for its piddling Mud Slap. Then you'll want to minimize around 4 times, making it even less likely to be hit with a Psycho Cut. This is more important for Clefable because Clefable doesn't have leftovers. Instead, Clefable carries a Lepa Berry, which it will then trick onto Mewtwo, buying you an extra 10 turns, or possibly more thanks to paralysis, should Mewtwo run out of PP. Now that we're set, it's time to start throwing Moon Balls. If your health gets low, you can heal, but Mewtwo misses so often that it probably won't even be necessary. I caught my Mewtwo before it ran out of PP, which kinda makes the 48 BP used to get Trick feel kind of like a waste, but in shiny hunting, those extra turns could mean far more hours wasted than it would take to play the Battle Frontier. And there you have it. One of the coolest shinies caught by one of the most useless balls by one of the most unique teams. This is truly a Pokemon challenge that would take many moons to complete. Hey, if you like this video on the strange design choices behind the Moon Ball, maybe you'd like to see this video on the strange design choices behind getting the Regis in both Pokemon Emerald and the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers games. Or if you're into more Johto remake content, check out this video on the Pokewalker's rarest encounters. If you like what I do and want to see me do more of it, consider becoming a channel member or checking out my Patreon, link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, see you next time.